Welcome to the Castro Files.
Hi, good evening.
How are you doing, honey?
I'm good. How about you?
Good. You ready to tell some creepy stories
Creepy?
tonight?
Yes.
We've got some creepy stories for you guys. Thank you so much for joining us again on our 8th episode.
Is it 8th already? Wow.
8th episode of the Castro Files.
It's going by fast.
Yeah, absolutely. We've told some pretty cool stories so far. We're going to continue telling some interesting stories, some creepy stories, some strange stories. You can find us out on the Castro Files on YouTube. You can find us. We post this out for the audio versions out under The Bar is Open with Beth and Greg. So go like and subscribe to that. Also on the Instagram. Mm-hmm. You can go out to the Instagram. It's where we post all of the pictures and everything that goes along with the show. So very easy to follow along if you're listening on audio. So very cool. What do you have to cover tonight? What are you going to go
I'm going to talk about a Wendigo.
Wendigo.
It's what it is, some stories about it.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And I've got some Bigfooty kind of stories. Yeah, we did a little trip up to Maryland for a wedding, and there was very specifically one, and it's not your typical.
Yep.
Or the typical name, I should say. So,
right.
Absolutely. All right. Let's jump into this. You good?
I'm good.
You want me to start or you want to
Yes,
start
you
tonight?
start.
You want me
Go
to
ahead.
start tonight?
Yeah.
All right, cool. So mine is the Sykesville Monster, which is a pretty interesting story that goes into it. So I've got three quick things. I want to start out with, this is off of Cryptid Wiki, which I didn't know existed until right now, or like till today when I was researching some of this. So Cryptid Wiki, the Sykesville Monster. So Sykesville is in Maryland, and I do have a picture of where it is in Maryland. Give me 1 second here. Let's see. Okay. Well, evidently it doesn't want to come up today. Of course, that's how it goes, right? Let's see. There we go. All right, so this is where Sykesville, Maryland is. So we went there again, like I said, for a wedding. We were at a distillery, of all places, to hear about this, right? And I've actually got the shirt. It's the Patapsco Distillery.
And
the back of the shirt
yummy stuff.
is actually got a Bigfoot on it, which is kind of cool. So I had to buy the shirt. We love shirts.
Well,
and
once
swag
she told
and
you the
stuff
story,
like that.
too, you were like, I got to have it.
Absolutely. So the Sykesville Monster is a hairy humanoid from Sykesville, Maryland, which has been sighted since 1970. Description of it is Sykesville Monster is a 7 to 8 foot tall, hairy humanoid. It is dark brown in color. Casts of the monster's footprints were taken, which are 13 inches long and 7 inches wide. So that's a fairly good footprint, right? So, sightings of the Sykesville Monster began in 1972. It was sighted by a truck driver who observed it sitting down before it got up and ran into the woods. The truck driver, who remained anonymous, said it could have been a man on stilts and seemed to be caked with mud from the waist down, kind of probably trodden through.
Right. Well, he's an animal.
Whatever. Yeah. In 1981, a man named Lon Strickler was fishing in the Patapsco River when he noticed a stray dog barking at a large clump of brush. Suddenly, a 7 to 8 foot hairy man emerged from the brush, causing the dog to attack. The creature fought back the dog, which then ran away. After witnessing this, Strickler drove to a phone and called the police. While he was initially told to stay at the scene and wait, he was then told to leave once police officers arrived. He returned to the locations hours later, noticing that the scene was taped off and several state and federal officials were in the area. Strickler tried to get answers from state officials for several days, but to no avail. He also contacted several news stations about the incident, who were at first interested, but later did not want to talk. Sightings of the Sykesville Monster have also been seen in Woodstock and Marriottsville, Maryland. So very interesting. Here is what would theoretically be an image of what was drawn up as the Sykesville Monster. So kind of looks like, the missing link, as they would say, right? Or
more caveman-y
kind of view of them. So it's pretty interesting. Explanation: following Strickler's encounter, residents are suspicious of the police, who feel like they covered up the incident. No records of the Sykesville monster exist in the police department. The theory of the Sykesville Monster is that it is an escaped patient from a nearby Springfield State Hospital. Following these rumors, Dr. Fred Pokris, superintendent of the hospital, stated that, quote unquote, nothing out of the ordinary has come to my attention. However, he did state that 10 to 12 people have taken unauthorized leave, one or two considered to be dangerous to themselves or to others. Unauthorized leave meaning they escaped.
Yeah.
Right? So
And it's not AWOL.
yeah, exactly. So it's very interesting. So I was able to also find, and this is where this is the story. Like there's an newspaper articles that were written about this back in 72 and 73, right?
Okay.
So this one is Carroll County, Maryland, Sykesville. Late 1972, early 1973. Quote unquote, hunt still in progress. Sykesville Monster interest spreads.
Okay.
By Bill Roden. Sykesville, Maryland. The fear and uncertainty that has gripped residents here the past 2 weeks has been intensified by 2 new reports of monster sightings received by police Friday. The Sykesville Monster was seen Friday evening by an out-of-state truck driver, as I mentioned before. Of high significance is the fact that a 1,400 population town 20 miles north of Baltimore, Maryland, in Carroll County, has jumped into nationwide headlines in national AFRO and other news media. I probably should have Googled what AFRO is.
It's probably a channel.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
Following the Baltimore Zoo Assistant Director Ted Roth called to say that he went to Sykesville and determined the footprint is by a large human foot with fallen arches. I mean, a 13 by 7 foot.
Yeah.
That's pretty big.
It's a
That's
big human.
I wonder what LeBron James is.
I don't know.
He's probably got a 13-inch foot, right? I mean,
I knew somebody who had a 15-inch foot in high school. So,
Jeez.
yeah, he was
in
big.
high school, he was a monster by himself, right?
Yeah.
So he said that he would report. He would report after he takes another trip to Sykesville to determine what the balance of the body might be. A Baltimore scientific research firm also in Sykesville, checking AFRO callers from educators to the man on the street, are on their way to the small town. So the truck driver's report, according to the truck driver who requested anonymity, the in quotes, stood approximately 7 to 8 feet tall.
Wow.
And appeared to be dark brown in color. Could have been a man on stilts. Kind of the story I just talked about, right? So, although he was unable to pinpoint the exact location of the sighting, the driver said it appeared to be sitting down. According to the driver, the thing, which is evidently minding its own business, stood, turned around, and sensing danger, dashed into the woods. As a result of the AFRO story Friday, an investigating organization, Odyssey Scientific Research in Baltimore, is on the scene. John Lutz, director of Odyssey, talked to the truck driver and said that there is an additional witness in Anne Arundel who reportedly saw the monster as well. Talking with eyewitnesses, although reluctant to classify the thing, which has been running loose in Sykesville, Mr. Jutz, Jutz, did state that at the present time, his corporation is listing the incident as unidentified prowler until more information is gathered and more positive identification can be made. Mr. Lutz added that tape recordings are being made of each witness account in order to form verbal records, which will be studied by veterinarians, zoologists, and biologists. According to Mr. Lutz, the entire incident could be the work of a prankster. It is very possible that a prankster will call the police department and say it was a big joke. AFRO returns. As of Sunday, when AFRO reporters returned to Sykesville's Oklahoma Hill, citizens were hardly joking about the situation, which they feel is very real. Mrs. Agnes Dorsey, mother of the young man who first saw the thing, said that she thought more should be done to effect its capture and or destruction.
Oh, wow.
I know, right? They're taking this seriously, like hunt this thing down.
It's a mom,
right?
that's why.
Yeah. They should have gangs of men out looking for it, she said. I hope it's caught. According to Anthony Dorsey, the monster has been seen in Woodstock and Marriottsville, Maryland, located 6 miles from Sykesville, Maryland. None with big feet. it is rumored that the prowler may be an escaped patient, like I'd mentioned before, according to Dr. Fred Pockris, rather, superintendent of Springfield. We always have a certain number of people who leave, again, like I mentioned before. So it goes into this. Even when we were there in Maryland, this is a year ago, right? This is still very much on my T-shirt, right?
Right.
It is very much part of the
community,
lore
yeah.
and the community. Yeah, the lore of the community.
Yeah.
And it's a quaint little town too.
It's super cute.
It's
very
maybe a half, like the little main street,
yeah, it's probably
half mile, maybe.
yeah, and
Not
older buildings. It's very
Beautiful, yeah.
it's very cool.
Yeah, even the distillery we went to was like originally a fire
Firehouse.
department and
Yeah.
all of these things, and they do ghost hunts upstairs and throughout
Yeah.
the building.
Well, they do ghost hunts throughout the town that start
Oops, sorry.
Upstairs.
Absolutely. So
Yeah.
very interesting little you go the Sykesville Monster.
Yeah, yeah. I guess people were scared. It wasn't
You
probably
didn't have social media back then.
well, you didn't
so
have
you
the
couldn't
lore of
capture
it today too. That
Yeah.
people are like trying to find it, not trying to hunt it
out
per
hunting
se.
them,
Yeah.
out looking for them.
Right.
The Bigfoot shows.
Yes.
So now I'm going to get into the known unknown, Tales of the Yucca Man.
Okay.
The desert has its own version of Sasquatch, and it's just as smelly and hairy.
Oh, nice.
So we'll turn this one off for a moment. There we go. All right, the story you'll hear most often goes like this. So this is Ken Lane, Desert Oracle. This is from 2015. The story you'll hear most often goes like this. There's a young Marine on guard duty in some far-off corner of the massive 29 Palms Desert training base. We've driven by that a million times, right? He hears an awful sound in the dark, something like a growl. Then the breathing coming from one side of his lonesome little guard booth and now from the other. It's circling him. He steps out into the dark, his sidearm drawn. There it stands, 8 feet tall, an unbearable stench from its hairy body, the eyes glowing like red coals.
Interesting.
Sometimes the Marine is knocked unconscious by the beast and found hours later by the next shift. One version occurs at an old rifle range where the watchman, also armed with a rifle, wakes up from the assault to find his weapon bent in half.
Oh, geez.
Since the 1970s, when the Mojave Desert base expanded from its World War II encampment, there have been regular reports of new recruits terrorized by both the Yucca Man and pranks inspired by tales. But most sightings of the spectral creature come from campers and hikers at Joshua Tree National Park. Tents have been opened in the night by stinking monstrosities, and there is an occasional large footprint or blurry photograph submitted as evidence, such as this one. A snapshot from a Hidden Valley campground has made the rounds for a decade now. The figure bounding over the boulders looks much like the iconic Bigfoot from Patterson Gilman film in 1967. Remember that one? It's kind of out, and it looks like somebody took it with a potato.
Right.
Right. And it's just kind of running, but it's a videotape.
Right.
Since the 1960s, when the tales of the Yucca Man and his desert cohorts were commonly reported by Southern California newspapers and television stations, amateur cryptozoologists and Bigfoot researchers have analyzed the blurry pictures and measured the prints in the sand, all in an effort to document a flesh and blood creature they believe exists alongside everyday mammals such as bears, coyotes, and humans. Do you believe in Bigfoot? I'm just curious.
I don't know.
Could be.
I mean, there's some that really do look like there's creatures, but then there's others I'm like, that's totally a dude in a costume.
Right?
You know?
Absolutely.
So,
like,
yeah.
is it? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, we've seen some shows where they're trying to find certain stuff, but I mean, I don't know. I just feel like if everybody's looking
videos
for
look
it,
better than
why haven't anybody
others.
actually found one? Like,
Especially nowadays with all the trail cams and stuff.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's interesting.
It's-
It's like,
it's-
but there's so much wilderness that
Yes.
is just like untouched
Yes.
through Canada and lots of the United States.
Right.
Maybe not untouched, but
vast.
vast. There's
Yeah.
so much. It's just open space, right? Like the Rockies and
Right.
stuff like that, right?
So I mean, there could potentially be things in there that we find new species all the time, right?
Right.
So.
Absolutely. But the natives who lived in California long before European colonization considered these creatures to be supernatural entities with names that often translated to hairy devils. They took care to avoid the gloomy spots where the devils were often seen. The Tongva people living in around the Santa Ana River called the Devil's Hideout east of the river's source in the San Bernardino Mountains, the camp of the Taquis, pronounced the same as Taquits, known to the Chahula of Agua Caliente. According to John Reed Swantons, the Indian tribes of North America, Taquis also survives as a site named at the head of the Santa Margarita River at Temecula Creek. Throughout Palm Springs in the Coachella Valley, you'll see it spelled Tahquitz, Tahquitz. The angry specter's unhappy home in the region is the cursed Tahquitz Canyon. Sometimes the Tahquitz, or Tahquitz as played a role in the creation stories, as in Chahila culture. Other times, and forgive me if I'm mispronouncing these, other times the creature was an omen or simply something weird in the wilderness that should be avoided. To the Kahia, the Tahquitz could be the original shaman.
Oh, interesting.
And a murderous monstrosity that collects victims from Tahquitz Rock or Lily Rock. Tahquitz also has been said to manifest as large green fireball moving through the sky.
Interesting.
The coastal and desert Indians should know the same creature is not in itself cause for skepticism. Under various names and dressed in myriad traditions, Yucca Man has been reported to the wilder parts of the Southern California area, as long as people have lived there. In Fontana, that hard and windblown inland empire town, there was a famed racetrack north of Foothill Boulevard called Mickey Thompson's Fontana Dragway. From 1955, the dragway's closure in 1972, following a gruesome series of fatal crashes, spectators repeatedly saw something they called the Speedway Monster, assumed to be a wild man resident of the foothills of nearby San Bernardino Mountains. It had the habit of crossing the rural land at the dragway's edge, causing during car races that produced horrific crashes. Wow. So this thing would show up and there would be a terrible accident. In the new suburbs of Antelope Valley, encounters with the Mojave Sasquatch reached epidemic levels from the 60s through the late 70s, as new housing developments in Lancaster and Palmdale pushed into the wild desert, and secret technology was tested at Edwards Air Force Base and Lockheed's notorious Skunk Works factory. Interesting, because remember, Skunk Ape is like a Florida thing, right? I don't know. I'm probably drawing some connection.
Maybe.
The Antelope Valley Daily Ledger Gazette described the common features of the eyewitnesses' reports in a staff report from June 1973 beneath the headline, Bigfoot surfaces again in Palmdale, 9 Mile Canyon. According to reporter Chuck Wheeler, the creature likes to run around houses and leaves footprints. That is its MO in the East Lancaster area, where footprints are found around several houses recently. One woman reported that the creature ran around her house and scratched at the door. A small boy sent to tell his father supper was ready was found hours later crying near a corral. When asked what happened to him, he answered that the big furry man would not let him pass.
Scary.
That'd be a little freaky if you were a kid. Southern California encounters were common enough in the 70s to keep multiple Bigfoot investigation groups busy taking reports. In March of 1973, a babysitter and 3 Marines, separately, we presume, reported seeing the Sasquatch in Lancaster. Nerves were frayed to the point that the 2 separate vigilante groups searching for the monster nearly killed each other 2 months later. According to the files of Bigfoot Field Research Organization, and this is a report from them, in May 1973, a research party in Lancaster attempting to follow up on several Bigfoot reports was forced to take cover when another party on the same sort of search panicked and started shooting when they thought they were being approached by a large creature. Fortunately, no one was injured. Yeah, that's getting a little hysteric,
Yeah,
right?
that's getting a little carried away.
Right? In recent years, the hair-covered, red-eyed Sierra Highway Devil has been repeatedly spotted by terrified drivers on Highway 14 near the junction of Pure Blossom Highway, always at night, always running along or across the road. The strangest tales comes from Edwards Air Force Base itself. The desert base adjoins the massive Rogers Dry Lake, with its miles of smooth desert runways and its famed for its right stuff test pilots and landings of NASA's space shuttles. There is significant subterranean infrastructure at Edwards Air Force Base, with the personnel and technology required to keep secret aircraft a secret. Security cameras were always pointed at sensitive areas. According to persistent stories from Edwards, those cameras repeatedly captured images of desert Sasquatch moving through the tunnels by night.
Interesting.
Entire families of the hairy monsters apparently traveled the base's buildings and corridors,
Interesting.
appearing and disappearing at will, and to the bewilderment of the base police sent to chase after the phantasms. With the report of Edwards' Bobby Ann Slate, that tireless Bigfoot researcher collected this report from the base policeman who was patrolling the old sled track section of the base, where the notorious Thelemite wizard and jet propulsion laboratory founder Jack Parsons tried out his rockets. Heading back to the main base, I noticed maybe 200, 300 yards to my left, these large blue eyes. I do a lot of night hunting, and it was strange. They were larger than anything I'd ever seen. The blue eyes had to be about 4 inches apart, 7 feet off the ground. Wow. I stopped the truck and sat there watching them. It was too dark to see any body shape or anything. The blue glows proceeded towards my truck at a right angle for about 100 yards and then stopped. So this thing was coming towards him. It walked down and cut over.
Interesting.
As an overpowering stench filled the desert air, Sergeant House saw the huge blue eyes again, now just 50 yards. The movement of the eyes was extremely fast. Another thing that bothered me was that they didn't just bop up and down. It was like two lights were wire moving from one point to another. So just zipping across.
Okay.
They weren't like
I get it.
running, right? A radio call gave him good reason to drive away fast. Because of the ribbing he'd suffered after filing a report, others in the squadron refrained from making formal statements about their encounters. But the encounters didn't end. Not until 2009 would Edwards Air Force Base officially acknowledge the many incidents with blue eyes.
Interesting.
2009 article in the base newsletter Inside Edwards, the entity known as Blue Eyes was much discussed at a reunion of the 65 10th Air Police Squadron officers who worked on the base between 73 and 79. Attendees traded memories of their bizarre experiences on patrol, such as seeing Blue Eyes, the local version of the Yeti near the South Base, or Marvin of the Mojave. They probably had a bunch of different names for him.
Yeah.
Right? A ghost who could be heard but not seen and left size 10 sneaker imprints in the sand. The now retired Edwards guard also recalled observing unexplainable objects in the skies. So, I mean, that place is probably pretty spooky anyway.
Yeah.
Plus, it's out in the middle of the
Nowhere.
desert.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
So, the Desert Rat's motto shared with the Air Force Test Center for which it served was ad inexplorata, or toward the unknown. Kind of perfect for that area.
Yes.
Right? So as with the Padres' old stories of hairy monsters living at the camp of devils along Santa Ana and Santa Margarita rivers, written accounts of monsters in Antelope Valley date back to the Spanish colonial era. Horace Bell, famed for his role in the frontier vigilante group called the Los Angeles Rangers, later wrote 2 influential books about life in the mid-19th century. One of those, On the Old Coast, being further reminiscence of a ranger, tells of a shadowy winged beast at Elizabeth Lake, the deep water hole where Sierra Pelona Mountains meet the Antelope Valley. The Sag Pond was created by the San Andreas Fault, and successive generations have branded this generally welcome geographic feature, ample fresh water in the desert, as a cursed place. Supposedly given its Old Spanish name by no less a figure than Juanipro Sierra himself, the Laguna del Diablo held an awful creature, a beast that would fly in the shadows, form over the ranchero from the 1830s. So, the winged wraith flew over the hacienda of Del Chico Vasquez, a man unimpressed by the folklore surrounding the lake. It was his foremen who alerted Don to the beast that was thrashing in the mud on the cursed lake shore. When he saw the creature, whether it was in the lake or in the sky or in the air, they never knew. Cattle and horses began to disappear shortly thereafter, with the eventual discovery of several carcasses, leading to the belief that the devil is in the lake. While Yucca Man and its cohorts are often described as huge, hairy, hair-covered humanoids, there are nearly as many reports of shadow beasts lacking any real definition beyond their brilliant, glowing eyes, often red, sometimes blue, as in the Edwards Air Force Base report. Such brazenly paranormal entities have much in common with England's Owl Man and the West Virginia Mothman. So, it's this that's where the cryptozoologist, it's like things that we don't know about, right? It's pretty creepy. So again, like the Yucca Man is another version.
These are all different versions of the same creature.
Potentially the same creature, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know. I kind of go back and it you know, like I had said, I showed that picture before. Is it like a missing link? Is it something different?
I don't know. I think it's because a lot of people will say it's like I'm trying to think of like there's a genre that the monkeys fall in, like
like apes, like great apes or something like that.
There's a more like it's a
scientific
group
form.
Well, and a lot of people think it falls. And it's like kind of a mix of.
It's right in between.
Yeah, an ape, ape and man.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So again, is it the Yucca Man? Is it Sasquatch? Is it the Skunk Ape?
It's all the things.
All of those different things, right? It's interesting. So that's my story for tonight, talking about the Yucca Man and talking about the Sykesville Monster.
Yep.
What do you've got a creepy story.
I do have a creepy story. Have you ever heard of a Wendigo?
I've heard of it.
Okay.
But I don't exactly know.
I'm going to give you a little background
that's
going to tell you a little bit about what it is, and then I'm going to give you some stories where they've been included. So the Wendigo, so this starts off with a description first. Okay. And this is from the Urban Legends, Ghost Stories, and Folklore, Haunting and Horrors. The Wendigo was gaunt to the point of emaciation. Its discated skin pulled tightly over its bones. With its bones pushing out against its skins, its complexion the ash gray of death, and its eyes pushed back deep into their sockets. The Wendigo looked like a skeleton recently disinterred from the grave. What lips it had were tattered and bloody. Unclean and suffering from separation of the flesh, the Wendigo gave off a strange and eerie odor of decay and decomposition and death and corruption. This is the well-known description provided by Basil H. Johnston of the forgive me when I say this name, Ojibwe teacher and scholar from Ontario, and the one expert and adaptly captures the physical characteristics that are most commonly associated with the famed Wendigo.
Right.
There are numerous origins, societies, peoples, and names all related to or connected to the Wendigo in one way or another, kind of like yours. Different places call them different things. For ancient tribal people to modern cinema and culture, the Wendigo holds a special place in folklore. Its name itself, Wendigo, or its many variations, Wetiko, Wetigo, etc., mean the evil spirit that devours mankind. Common among all accounts is that the Wendigo is purely evil, supernatural and cannibalistic, having been human after all. Famine, starvation, greed, gluttony, fear, and cold are its most closely regarded allies. Some legends focus more on the speed and cunning of this manhunter, saying that it can traverse any terrain at great speeds and is at its most dangerous in the bitter colds of northern biomes. Others focus more on its ferocity and brute strength. It is able to grip a man's limb it's able to rip a man's limb from his torso with nary but a thought. Some versions of this monster, Genesis describe it as akin to Bigfoot, yet other places say it is in the were family.
The werewolf family?
Yeah. So while these tales meet a certain need within the niche of folklore and the urban legend, they seem to stray from the very real and very monstrous origins from which the legend truly came. Unlike many fiendish cryptids of this ilk, the Wendigo is set apart not only by its cunning as a hunter, despite its decrepit and emaciated form, but also in its skill to lure unsuspecting victims and infiltrate their minds in such a way as to turn them into Wendigos themselves. So here are some of the legends. The legend is widely known to have begun in the forests of Nova Scotia and the Great Lakes region in Canada and the U.S., specifically Wisconsin, through a few sightings, and other stories have been reported from Minnesota and Michigan as well. And it is credited to the Ojibwe East.
Can you spell that real quick?
Ojibwe.
Okay.
Ojibwe.
Ojibwe?
Oh, something like that. Yeah. Eastern Cree, Mushkego, Naskapi, and Innu tribes with its inception. So Indian tribes,
Okay.
Native American tribes. The Wendigo is a murderous, human-like beast or spirit who is often corrupted by greed and gluttony. It was once human, though could never be mistaken for that now. The Wendigo comes from Algonquin Native American Native folklore, and says that long ago near the Great Lakes area in the dead of winter, certain few men of hunting party, unable to find food, succumbed to their hunger and began to prey on their fellow huntsmen. It is said that as expert hunters, they lured their companions into elaborate traps with a false calm of food and warmth, and a fleeting respite from the cold and winds of the unforgiving north. Those unrelenting winds and near constant snow provided the perfect opportunity for ambush, as the cries and subsequent noises of the butchering and devouring of their friends would be muffled and carried off unheard, borne away from furthermore by the frigid gale. The sin, however, would remain, a dark stain on their tormented souls. This unforgivable act of murdering and consuming their fellow men condemned their souls to eternity, to an eternity wandering, never to be accepted by ancient spirits. It is told that this eternal damnation was too much for the lost souls, and they became twisted, deformed, demented, and grotesque, and obsessed with devouring the flesh of men. They searched and searched until they found and inhabited once again their old bodies, now decaying and rotting. The unnatural transformation that their souls had experienced bled over to their bodies and distorted their bones as well. Bones elongated, stretching and tearing the skin. Horns and claws formed as the creature took up the mantle of a hunter.
You want to share a picture?
Give me 1 second. The legend says that legend says that so evil is the Wendigo that a very ground it walks upon is cursed. It withers and dies immediately, upon being trodden on by the beast. So cursed is this creature to even happen once upon a chance, even to see it and live, one spirit would be forever stained. The mind would shatter and would never be the same. So just seeing it, yeah.
So this is one version of what it might look like. Of course, this is an artist's depiction,
right?
Because nobody knows what it actually looks like,
right.
So
but it does. You see the long fingers. The arms are very very skinny, gout stretched.
Just cannibalistic looking.
Yeah.
And then you have another version, which is along the line of like this deer-headed, antlered, kind of still creepy looking thing, right?
Yep. So let me give you some of the cases.
Okay.
One of the most returned to stories in the Wendigo lore is that of Cree trapper called Swift Runner.
Okay.
Swift Runner was a guide for the Northwest Mounted Police and traded his furs with the Hudson Bay Company. He was a tall, strong man and very good at his job. He was well liked and well educated. He was married with 6 children, and he adored them all dearly. In 1878, Swift Runner and his family, under extreme duress due to freezing, blizzard-like conditions, and lack of food, was quickly leading to starvation, faced tragedy when their oldest boy succumbed to the toll that the cold and the lack of food was having on him and died. Swift Runner, then just 25 miles from Hudson Bay Company trading post, slaughtered his wife and 5 remaining children, butchering them and consuming their flesh in the stew that he kept throughout the winter. Post-thaw, Swift Runner arrived at the trading post without his family. Suspicions were immediate and made all the more substantial when he did not offer any explanation as to their whereabouts. Worried for their daughter and grandchildren, Swift Runner's in-laws pleaded with the Northwest Mound Police to investigate. Reluctantly, Swift Runner led officials back to his winter cabin and to a shallow grave where his oldest son was buried. He explained that his son had died of starvation, and the mounted police were satisfied enough with that their explanation to move on, and the mounted police were satisfied enough with that explanation to move on. That is, until a sergeant stumbled upon a human skull.
Of the the one kid died. Okay.
Right. No, but that's where they were good with that until somebody came across a human skull.
Okay.
Swift Runner tried to belay guilt and say that he hadn't any idea whose skull it was, but the gruesome discovery of human bones, innards, and skin strewn about the area soon had him confessing to murders and to cannibalism. The details with which he described the crime was far too vivid for a book like this, but suffice it to say that he has some very intimate knowledge of what happened. He stated that throughout the winter and snowstorms, his dreams had become tormented by a Wendigo. It would call to him while he slept and give him visions of the deaths of his family. Soon, the visions haunted him even during the daytime hours, and eventually he surrendered to the madness and became a Wendigo, killing first his wife, then forcing his second oldest to kill the infant as he was too busy with the middle child. He murdered the second oldest last, and it has taken the boy some time to kill the baby. Swift Runner then skinned and butchered the bodies and licked off their flesh until the thaw. This
is a documented case.
Yeah. A disgusted and appalled group of soldiers escorted Swift Runner to Fort Saskatchewan, where he was tried and hanged for his crimes, but not before he was able to escape long enough to murder and consume his mother-in-law, who he said at his hanging was rather tougher than the rest.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Another oft version of the Wendigo is that of Jack Fiddler, an OG Cree medicine man and chief. Fiddler was best known for being a Wendigo hunter, having 14 Wendigo kills under his belt during the course of his life. These Wendigo
They're not just serial killers, really?
This guy killing the Wendigo? No, he's killing 14 Wendigos.
I was like, oh my God, he's got 14.
No, he's killed 14 Wendigos under his belt through the course of his life.
Or he's a serial killer. One of the other.
Right. These Wendigo were either evil spirits sent by rival enemy shaman or members of his own tribe who had given in to some base desire for human flesh. In either case, it would Fiddler's duty to react quickly and without mercy, killing the creature before they could harm others. It was even forced to kill his own brother, Pete Flett, after he turned into Wendigo during a particular difficult season of famine. The legend of Wendigo was well known throughout the tribes, missionaries, and traders of the area, and dealing swiftly with them was a necessity. There are numerous reports of people turning Wendigo and eating human flesh within the Hudson Bay Company records. In 1907, after a successful Wendigo hunt, Jack and Joseph, another of his brothers, were arrested for murder. It was later discovered that they had digested the flesh of their victims after turning Wendigo themselves. Jack committed suicide before his trial, but Joseph was tried, convicted, and sentenced to life in prison. So they got infected, possessed, whatever you want to say, of the very creature they were hunting.
Aren't they just cannibals? But when you get to a starvation point, right?
But this is okay. So hold on.
Okay.
Throughout the 1800s and the 1920s, Wendigo cases were almost commonplace across the northern states and southern eastern areas of Canada. But those became more and more likely to be cases of Wendigo psychosis rather than actual Wendigo activity.
Okay.
So Wendigo psychosis. Now that these cases might sound like more like possessions or mental breakdown or insanity. Right? And that's because more than likely that's exactly what they were. As these cases were studied and because of the lore Wendigo so prevalent in the area, it was widely accepted that this indeed was Wendigo possession. The Wendigo is known to be able to sicken the mind and draw into a weakened and fragile state until it is no longer able to ward off possession. From there, it is a simple matter of the soul being twisted and warped by the pure evil of the creature and victims becoming Wendigo themselves. As more and more cases begin to emerge and less actual physical sightings of the Wendigo reported, however, a new, more medical train of thought was deployed: Wendigo psychosis. Wendigo psychosis is the undeniable urge to consume human flesh even when alternate food sources are available.
Okay, so you got a bunch of berries around, but you're going to go eat your brother.
Yes, exactly. The International Statistical Classification of Disease and Related Health Problems, the ICD for short, details Wendigo psychosis this way. Rare, historic accounts of cannibalism or cannibalistic obsession. Symptoms include depression, homicidal or suicidal thoughts, and a delusion, compulsive wish to eat human flesh. Some controversial new studies question the syndrome's legitimacy, claiming cases were actually a product of hostile accusations invented just to justify victims' ostracism or execution. So Wendigo psychosis eventually eclipsed the legend of the Wendigo. So the psychosis became bigger than the actual
Yeah, I mean, I imagine.
monster.
FOMO,
It
fear of
became
missing
a
out.
valid defense in court, staying the execution of numerous criminals who could claim such a disorder that is not much of a defense today. So basically,
Yeah, you can't eat people.
well, they were saying they just went crazy. That
They went crazy with the Wendigo psychosis
yes.
versus they weren't actually possessed by the
Right.
Wendigo.
Yes, they were. It now was their defense. They were using it like I
ate-
thought I was possessed, so I acted like I was
ate
possessed
Charles.
because I
and
thought I was a
Sally.
Wendigo. Yeah.
I was really hungry. It was cold out. I didn't feel like going out. So I just
So
ate
where
the
does this leave us? Is one of the most well-known urban legends ever nothing more than a cannibalistic mental illness? No. But our understanding of the Wendigo is a bit warped by a modern media take on the creature and the natural order of things being lost and forgotten. Much like the werewolf or the vampire, the Wendigo of legend is an alpha. There only ever were a handful of actual Wendigo beasts. Those wayward hunters that we discussed earlier committed the ultimate sin, murdering and devouring their fellow tribesmen. It is not known how many men turned that fateful winter, but according to the legend, it was a certain few. These certain few are the Wendigo alphas, the true beasts of legend, the physical incarnation of pure evil, 15 feet tall, skin stretched and torn, horned and clawed. Emaciated and forever hungry, this ravenous hunter of man still haunts the northern forests of the U.S. and the southeastern borders of Canada. It is cursed to do so for eternity, as neither heaven nor hell will accept it. Damned to devour human flesh, its insatiable desire drives it ever onward, killing and eating. From these creatures come the murderous and cannibalistic stories that we are most familiar with and that are most closely associated with the term Wendigo. Turning Wendigo refers to Wendigo psychosis and is, as we now know, a mental illness where the victim obsessed on consuming human flesh. So it goes on to talk a little bit like you probably won't ever see one like a real Wendigo because
I hope not.
they have extremely long hibernation habits and are rarely emerged from their depth of the caves except to feed. So
if you see one, you're
Run.
kind of like out of luck because it's
right,
like
it's going to eat you.
your lunch.
The likelihood you'll ever encounter a true Wendigo is remote, and your survival is more. And if you do, your survival is even more remote.
That's what I was just gonna say, right? Like if you happen to be the
If you happen to be the one person to stumble across him, you're going to just be missing.
you're done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's my story.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's a very I had never heard like the background. Like I said, I hadn't you brought it up today.
I
You're
know
like,
that-
should we go over this?
I thought
And
I
think
knew
it's
that
really
it was
cool.
kind of like an Indian folklore.
I was thinking like it's almost like Skinwalker-ish.
Yeah,
kind of those types.
I think it's probably in that same realm.
Yeah.
I think they're bigger along the Native American,
Yeah, and those
lands
tribes, yeah.
and tribes. But it is interesting how, though, it also has been used by humans
in a psychology
as
kind
a
of
way to
situation.
explain why they did what they did. They got
Why
the
did I eat
Wendigo
everybody?
psychosis.
Or-
I thought I was possessed, so I did the thing I was expected
or
to do.
it's just an excuse.
Yeah, it's probably a little both.
Very interesting. Very cool story. Thank you
Thanks.
so much
Yeah,
for
of
sharing
course.
that. So, everybody, those are our stories for tonight. If you need anything or have any cool stories, rather, please send them to us. We'd
Yes,
appreciate
that'd
it.
be great.
Just send them over to, you can ping us on our Instagrams at LaMama07 for Beth, and I'm at Greg_Lamontagne. I think it's Greg_Lamont. It's one of those.
Yeah.
You find me. Or the Castro Files. You can always find us on Instagram on the Castro Files.
Yes.
I'll post the pictures out that we shared tonight out
Yep.
there. And then also go out and check out the prior shows we've done. We've done some pretty cool ones.
Yeah.
We've done some Dybbuk boxes, and you've done some creepy horror kind of like
Like
ghost
murder
story.
mysteries. And, yeah.
So there's other ones out there you can definitely go check out. So with
Absolutely.
that, I love you. Thank you so much.
Love
It was
you too.
fun.
This is fun.
I'll catch you.
Thanks, babe.
I'll catch you next week, but I'll catch you whenever, and we'll catch you guys next week. Take care.
Bye, guys.